Hey guys, it's Alicia from Mountain Chalker Studio. I wanted to just do a quick tutorial on how I repurpose these frames and make them into a Chalk Couture project. Basically what I do is I get these thrift store frames for like $1. They're all dusty. They're going to be really dirty. So what you want to do is you want to wipe this down with some gentle dish soap and just clean this off really good. Sometimes they're beat up pretty bad. Sometimes the corners need to be reinforced, so I usually put some glue in here and a little corner clamp to fix them. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and start with cleaning this frame up, and I'll show you how that works. Alright, so I've got this rag, this art rag that I used, and it's kind of dirty, but I just want to go ahead and wipe this down and make sure that I get all the corners in with the rag, because if you don't get all of those little areas where there might be dust collected, it's going to be really hard to paint over that. So let's just go ahead and clean this up. We're going to wipe this down. And once you wipe this down a couple times, you're just going to let it dry. Just let it air dry, and then we'll come back with the next step. Alright, so this has had time to dry, probably just a couple minutes. It doesn't take a long time. I usually do this step first only because some of these frames come from smokers' homes, and you're going to smell smoke on here, on some of these, if they're really, really dirty. So if you're going to be working with something like that, definitely work with maybe an extra stronger cleaner to get some of that smoke out, and put it out in the sun so that it'll have a good chance to dry. But I clean it so that I can see the imperfections on this frame. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take some steel wool and try to fix, just kind of sand some of the stuff down. Sometimes the corners, you can see, are going to be popped up a little bit. I like to put a little bit of wood putty in that just to smooth it out, so that when I spray paint this, it's going to have more of a seamless effect. So, and the frame already has like a little bit of, little holes in there, on there, but those are going to give it that extra character, which is okay. So, let me grab the steel wool, and we'll sand it down, and then I'll show you how I wood putty this corner right here. Alright, so I've got the wood putty here. This is the wood putty that I like to use. It goes on pink and it dries brown. This has been used quite a bit, so my wood putty in here is already like a tannish brown color, and then my steel wool. And I try to get the finest coarse, as far as the steel wool. You don't want the really coarse kind when you're working with these projects. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the putty, and I'm just going to get a little bit out with my putty knife. You can get these putty knives in like a set of 3 different sizes. And since this is already a little dry, it's going to kind of flake, and I'm just going to use my fingers to try to wedge it into place. I hope you can see that okay. If not, I'm going to move this here. And I'm just going to try to squeeze that in that corner to make it kind of like a smooth surface. We did this a lot when we were doing a lot of framing. Sometimes the frames just don't cut at a perfect 45, and when you're putting them together, sometimes they have a little bit of a gap, so you want to put a little bit of frame putty. Wood putty works fine, same thing. The kind that we used at the framing shop was different color of putty depending on the frame, if you had gold foil frames or red frames or blue frames, whatever. So we had colored kind as well to get in to those cracks. But yeah, don't worry about making a mess. It's okay. This stuff flakes off and it dries super fast. So it looks kind of messy. We're going to sand all of that stuff off, but it's just going to create that smoothness between the 2 uneven edges. I'm not going to worry too much about these other ones. I think they're going to be okay. These corners will be fine. And then once it gets painted over, it'll just be fine. So, alright, so that's it for the putty. Put this aside. And you really want to put that seal back on, pop it down. so it doesn't get air. You want it to stay pink. Alright, steel wool. You're just going to go ahead. This is really good if you've got a really intricate frame that's got a lot of scrollies, a lot of different types of design. You want to use this to be able to sand, rough it up just a little bit so that when your paint is applied, it'll stay. And it smooths out some of those imperfections. So I apologize if I move in this video. The camera, and it's getting bumpy on the video, but I'm going to go ahead and do the all four sides, and then I will be back to show you what it looks like. Alright, so I only spent about maybe 2 minutes just kind of using this steel wool brush over it, and it's really fine particles that come off of this. If you want to wear a dust mask, definitely wear a dust mask. But it doesn't really pick up a lot of dust, it just picks up a lot of the little fibers from the steel wool pad and get into those small spots too. Alright, so I'm going to take my rag again and I'm going to wipe it down a second time. And after we do this, then we're just going to let it air dry, let it sit for a couple minutes. It's really not a lengthy process to get these done. If you buy a whole bunch of these frames from the thrift store, you can definitely get these done in under 30 minutes. And that's just the cleanup process. You want to make sure you get inside on the edges on here, because we're going to be painting those as well. Yep, and feel free to use a paper towel if you'd like to help speed the drying process. That's not a problem either. Alright, so you can see, now you can see more of the details of your frame. And you see all of these rough edges right here, and that's going to be okay because you're gonna spray paint over that. It's just going to give it character. It's just going to give it that rustic look. This is the corner here that we did the putty on, and there's a little bit of putty left here in this corner, right in there. So I'll just take the paper towel and just kind of wipe a little bit off. I'm not too worried. This is going to be a white frame, so it's going to be fine. Alright, I'm going to let this sit for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to come back with my spray paint, and I'm going to show you how I spray the paint on there. Alright, I'm back. So this is the type of paint that I use, is the Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch, the 2X Ultra Cover Paint and Primer. I like to use the paint and primer because the primer actually, gives it that first coat, and it helps it adhere to your surface. And then I'm using the semi-gloss white for wood, metal, plastic, and more. So this is safe to use on those surfaces. So I'm going to go ahead and start spray painting, and you'll see that I just want to do short motions like this to make sure I get the first layer of paint covered on the frame. And then we will let it sit. The dry time does take about 30 minutes or so for it to dry before you can put the next coat on. And I like to roll this outside on my roller cart and just make sure that the sunlight gets to it. You don't really want to paint indoors like I'm painting in the inside of my garage, but I want to roll this out quickly because you don't want the fumes inside your workspace. Alright, so you can see we're just painting. You'll see some cracks, you'll see some imperfections in the frame, and that's okay. Just short spurts. You don't want to spray too much where it's going to like drip and create this, like this extra paint blob. If you do happen to get those, you can always take a 250 sander or your steel, the wool pad that we used earlier, and try to wipe some of that off, but you're just going to have to do all the cleaning process all over again. So let's paint the rest of this side. And we'll paint here. There's a lot of people that like to wear their masks, respirators while they're painting. Definitely good if you're in small spaces. Today is a hot day, so it's already starting to dry pretty quickly. But once I roll it out outside on my roller cart, it'll dry a lot faster. These cans aren't really necessarily meant to be sprayed upside down, but you can get away with, just spraying away from you. Definitely, if you're spraying outside, don't spray into the wind because you don't want the paint back in your face. Alright, I think that's good for the first coat. We're going to let this sit outside and dry, and we're going to go ahead and start the next process, which is cutting the MDF board or the insert that you're going to be using to fit this frame. Right, so before I started this process, I went ahead and I measured a 12 by 16 on the inside, right? So 16 inches, and then inches this way. That's usually a standard size for a frame. That's the size that we want to cut our insert to. I pick up my MDF boards from Home Depot, or I use scrap wood or plywood or any kind of insert that would fit that thickness of your frame. This happens to be an old Home Depot chalkboard that's been scratched up that we can't really use. So I'm going to be cutting this into a 16 by 12 shape. So I want to look at it and see what are my flattest sides that have the straight edges, because this has been already cut, and this side is a little bit jagged, so I'm going to cut that off right here. This is already a 16th inch length, I believe, so I think all we have to do is just do a cut off on one side of this board. So let's do a quick measurement. The measuring tape. This is 16. And we're going to go from this edge over, we're going to mark 12 inches. Inches all the way across to the end. Then I'm going to use my level as my straight edge. Align it to the bottom, align it to the lines. I'll just draw a line because that's are going to be our cut line. Just do a double check on 12 inches. And remember, every time you're cutting, you're going to be losing about 1/8 of an inch on your edge of your surface. For small projects, I like to use my Black & Decker. It's a handheld little machine. It has a small blade, not a big blade, but small enough that you can do these smaller projects. If you're going to be cutting large pieces of wood, you can definitely use like a hand skill saw or a miter saw or something a little bit bigger that's going to help for your bigger projects. But for this one, since it's really thin, it's not going to take much to cut this piece off. Anytime you're cutting, when you're cutting, you want to use safety glasses. So I want to put those on before I start cutting this board. So let's see, I'm going to have this hold this, put some weight on that. Okay, and make sure that my battery is charged. And we're done. That's it. Got it cut. Sometimes when you cut these, they may be a little bit off towards the end or at the beginning. This one is just a little bit off of 12. I'm going to take my sanding block, which is just one of these 3M sanding blocks. You can shove a piece of sandpaper in there if you wanted to. I'm just using a rotary sander extra 80 grit to sand these corners off. I'm going to sand a little bit extra off just because it's a little bit wider. I'm going to sand the whole thing because I'm going to be painting this MDF gate. Alright, so once it's cut and you've just wiped down all of the sawdust, I use that same rag, and it's okay, it's going to be wet because I'm going to go ahead and paint this with acrylic paint. I save my scraps for other projects or for stir sticks or anything like that. So for this project, we're going to be using a white frame, and we're going to use, I think, a green color on this one. So let me go get the green color and I'll show you how I paint these. I use the green multi-surface folk art paint, acrylic paint, to paint these, and these seem to work very well. I use one of these 2-inch brushes, soft bristle brush, and a spray bottle of just regular water. So what I want to do is just open the bottle up and drop some green paint on here. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and paint. And once it starts to dry, because I've got my garage door open, it is a warm day, I will use a spray bottle, get some water on there to get this to spread a little bit better. You might have to add a little bit more paint to it, but it's pretty much the first coat, not to worry about. You know, if you want more of a distressed look, I still recommend you doing 2 coats so that you can cover the MDF board underneath. If you leave too much and it becomes exposed to water or something later on, it may bow. So you just want to make sure you have a good coverage for your first and second coats. You just eyeball how much paint you want to use. There's really no set guideline other than you just go for it. You can see it's starting to dry really fast. I wanted to do a green color because I am starting my Christmas in July projects. So I wanted to start making some surfaces that have the red and the green with white frames available for when I start working those projects. Alright, quick brush strokes on there, and we're just going to let that dry, and we're going to come back and do a second coat, and then we're going to seal it. While the green insert is drying, we're going to go ahead and spray paint another coat onto this frame that has been sitting outside approximately 5 to 6 minutes, and it's pretty warm and it's ready for another coat. Depending on how intricate your frame is, you might have to do 3 or 4 coats. Usually one spray paint can does the job. I like to keep several on hand just in case the nozzle clogs up or you get any kind of weirdness with these cans because they're not always perfect. Alright, so that should do it. Looks like there's still some darkness in here on the inside. We'll capture those on the next spray round. So we will roll this back outside and let it dry a little bit longer than 5 minutes. The insert was outside just as long as it took us to spray paint that frame, and it's pretty much already dry. So we can go ahead and add our next coat of green. Then we can add some water to it and even it out. You can do all kinds of really cool stuff with the acrylic paint. For my son, I did a two color part sign with the green and black, but instead of using black acrylic paint, I used black spray paint over the acrylic to give it almost like a dirty, vintage, old style look. These brushes work great because they're just so soft and they give you really nice even brush strokes. You know, if you want to go diagonal and you want heavy duty brush strokes, you know, press a little bit harder, but I just want really soft so that the colors just kind of gel together and that I don't have a lot of brush strokes at the end. So that's it. I'm going to let that sit and then I'm going to seal it after it dries, and then after it gets done sealing, then we're ready for chalking. So this is done drying outside, and I noticed that there's some heavy duty brush mark going on right here. Not sure I really care for that. So I'm going to show you what I do to smooth out that imperfection. But in the meantime, I'm just going to let this cool down because it's been outside, it's been hot. I'm actually going to use a size D transfer on this little board. Hopefully, my plan is to just capture the words and let all the other stuff kind of scroll off. Yep, like this, scroll off the edge. And then with the frame, I think it'll look really cool. So for right now, let's go ahead and we're going to sand off that little imperfection with my 220 sanding block. They come in a pack of 2. They're probably about $7, I think, for 2. And they work really good on these types of surfaces just to smooth out any little rough spots. It's going to just stress your green a little bit, and I'm okay with that. I want it to look like a vintage green board. Some persistent brush strokes here. And you can just do the best that you can. Alright. Green on your sanding block, and I'm going to use my rag again. Wipe this down. Before I seal, I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to use a tacky cloth A tacky cloth is what wood makers use to peel back to remove any dust from a surface before they start lacquering or shellacking their wood pieces. And it feels kind of like beeswax and cheesecloth. And it's just picking up all the little pieces that you don't want to be trapped on your board forever once you spray seal it. I'm using the Rust-Oleum 2X Ultra Cover Matte Clear. Seals, protects, and revitalizes for wood, metal, plastic, and more. So this is non-yellowing, fast drying, UV resistant. It's really, really cool. I get this at Home Depot. You can pick them up at any of your local hardware stores. If you're in Canada, just ask them at your hardware store if they carry this. So I want to make sure that I put an even coat on this without creating too many spots that didn't get sprayed, because the spray nozzle isn't always perfect streaming, so you might get a few spots that are not sprayed. So I just spray it once before I start chalking it. I'm going to put it back outside, let it dry. I don't want these fumes inside the garage. Alright, so I let this sit outside for several minutes, probably a good 30 minutes or so. We're going to go ahead and finish this white paint on the frame. Hopefully this will be our last coat. But let's see. I can see that there's still some dark spots right around the edges where the can didn't really get, so I'm going to have to do some maneuvering of this frame to try to get some of those dark pieces filled in. And I think that's going to be it. I don't think that we're going to have to do another coat of paint. So let's go for it. Alright, I think we're good. My spray can is about to be empty. So let me put this outside and let's start on the insert. Alright, so we brought the insert in from outside and just trying to figure out where the placement's going to be. I would like the piece on earth to not be parallel to the board, so I want to do it a little bit like this. Might be a little tricky because it is a bigger transfer, so let's just try it. It's a super sticky transfer, so I'm going to go get my fuzzing cloth. The fuzzing cloth helps the transfer not to be so sticky. So you want to do this a couple times. It's so challenging to do this on your own when you're doing a bigger transfer. Usually I have a helper and we work on this together, but it's okay. So we got this down. We're going to fuzz it on the microfiber side of the cloth. It always helps if your surface is clean too. I have a little bit of sawdust on here. On this towel, and it's picking it up on the transfer. So I'm just going to have to do my best. The reason we fuzz these is because we want to make sure that you don't pick up a lot of fibers from your wood when you peel this back. Alright, so let's focus on getting this not parallel. And we want the edges to run off, so I think that'll be okay. Alright, I'm going to go grab my big squeegee because you can see those little pieces of sawdust are in there. But I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to push through and work through this. I use the large squeegee to get any air bubbles out. If you have sawdust on your screen, that might be an issue. Mine seems to be in between the screen, and if it is, it's just going to be a distress sign, and I'm okay with that too. So, alright, we're just going to use straight up white chalk paste. We are not going to be using any colors. We're not going to get fancy on this. We're just going to go straight up white chalk paste. My chalk paste is a little dry, so I'm just going to add some water from my distilled water cup. Mix it in real good. You don't need a lot of water. Don't want it too runny, but you do want it like a yogurt consistency. And since we are technically outside and it's super hot, you don't want it to dry super fast on you because the chalk paste does dry fast. So I'm just mixing my Chalkology paste, and then I'm going to dab some on my, not my screen, but the top of my screen. And I'm going to use the big squeegee to bring it all in, smooth it all in together. We may or may not have some excess depending on how much chalk I put out there, but let's work this. I'm just finding the edges of my board, bringing it towards me. I'm not worried about the screen. I just want to make sure I cover the whole area. Alright, looks like we're probably going to have some extra chalk. I put the chalk back into the chalk jar. Save it for another project. Squeegee off any excess. You seriously just want to work really fast because it will dry on you on top of your transfer and it will go through. Alright. Washing my hands off. And I gotta peel this transfer off quickly. So this will be the tricky part, doing this solo. You want to peel back from two corners. You want to peel back towards you. Trying to put my fingers on the chalk pieces, and it is pretty tough. This transfer might stick to itself. You'll have to unstick it in the sink. Whoa, alright, there it is. Alright, so I finished spraying off my transfer, and I'm going to set that out to dry. I'm going to take a look at my insert, and I'm going to see any areas that I need to clean up. Looks like maybe just a little bit right in this area. Just looks like a little dirty right in there. I can just take a Q-tip and clean that off. But for the most part, that's going to be my insert. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my frame around it to show you what it looks like. And then maybe we'll do some Christmas bows on that to give it a little bit of red color after for embellishing purposes. To clean those areas, I just grab a Q-tip, just wet it down with my spray bottle, and all I want to do is just dab around those areas that had a little bit of chalk extra coming through, and just clean those areas up. Very easy process. When you're working on a chalkboard, it's pretty much the same thing. One of the reasons why I like to seal this is that if it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to turn out from the get-go, you could always erase it and start over because it has already been sealed and the color is not going to come up, whatever your surface color background is. I'm not too worried about the edges because that's going to be covered by the actual picture frame. So just a little bit of smudging, and it's really not a big deal because if you're trying to make this look like a, an old-timey picture, it's going to be distressed. Like my E down here, it's a little bit distressed, and I'm okay with that. I think it looks fine. So let me grab the frame and I'll show you what it looks like with the frame on. Alright, so I've gone outside and I've gotten the frame, and here's your insert. Frame is here. I'm going to set this inside here. Can you see that okay? That's what it's going to look like. See if I can pan out a little bit. Alright, so not bad. I think it's kind of cool. And then, like I said, I might embellish, add maybe some red bows on here. Maybe add a big bow around it and give it a little bit of color. And make it a little bit more Christmas-timey. So that's it. That's doing the insert. I'm going to show you how to use the Fletcher tool on stapling that into the frame next. I definitely would recommend you creating a box similar to this where you have a ledge in here for when you're stapling corners. You don't want to break open your frame by stapling one side and then part of your frame comes off. So what I mean by that is basically you want to line this on a corner that you're going to be stapling so that when you staple, your frame is intact. If you have it just out here and you don't have a frame and you're stapling on the edges, this piece of the frame might pop off. So you definitely want to have some support when you are using your staple gun or your Fletcher gun, whatever you're using for stapling your frames. So this Fletcher tool is a tool that I used when I did a lot of custom framing, and it's a point driver. It drives those little points that bend up and down that you see in the back of your regular picture frames. This is what the inserts look like, and then you just drop them in here. You pull this back and drop them in here to refill. But they basically just drive the points into the inside of your frame. If your insert is thicker, it's up higher than the side of your frame, then you want to angle it down just a little bit to get into that side of that frame. Alright, so let's staple a couple in here. Okay, you see them already in place. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to move this to the other long end and make sure that my insert is in there properly. If you cut your insert too short, you might see a little bit of a gap on the other side, and you don't want that. You want to make sure that it is pushed as best as you can up to the edge. Okay. Alright, so now you see those in there. I'm going to do the same thing with the short ends. It's up to you how many you think you need, depending on the size of your project. I usually do 2 or 3 on each side, depending on how big it is. That's all there is to it. It's really not that hard. You know, to learn more, you can go on YouTube. You can definitely find a lot more different types of projects, framing projects or woodworking projects. That's basically how I've learned a lot of these different tricks and used my previous skills as a framer to repurpose and find new ways of making, you know, recycling into Chalk Couture pieces. So that's it. I mean, that's pretty much it. I will take a picture once it's done and I've done embellishing it. I did not seal it before I stapled it in here, because if I find any more areas that I overlooked, like right here, that need to be cleaned up, I will take the Q-tip and clean it up, and then I will spray seal the whole thing together, because I want to make sure that this paint doesn't flake off or anything as I continue to work on this. So that's it for the Fletcher tool. When I finish this frame, I will be putting screw eyes, which are these little guys, screw eyes and some hanging wire on the back. Usually the best recommendation for putting the wire on these frames is you measure from top to bottom and you take a third. So if this is 16, if this is 20, 18, you want to go right about 6 inches, and then you put your screw eyes in both ends, 16 inches or 18 inches, and then you want to do 6 inches here, 6 inches here, and tie your wire pretty tight so that it doesn't show up here, up at the top. It's got to be tight so it only has a little bit of slag right here that you can hang it with. So that's pretty much it. That's it for making an insert and repurposing a frame and using the Fletcher tool. So if you have any questions, let me know. Let me know if there's anything I can help you with. This is definitely a busy one, but it's actually pretty cool. You know, it might be like a nice little setting behind a tree or next to cookies on a table. I think it's just going to look really nice once it's finally completely done and we add some bows to it. Alright guys, thanks for watching. It's Alicia from Mountain Chalkers Studio. We're in my shop today, so we're in the garage part and we're just making stuff. We're just making as many things as we can for Christmas in July. And if you're interested in learning more, or you're already a designer, thanks for watching. If you're not a designer and you don't have a sponsor, check out mountainchalkers.com. And if you want to look at more of the products that we're coming up, we're going to be having a whole lot of new products coming up this fall within the next few weeks, mid-July I believe. So definitely check back mountainchalkers.com/CC for Chalk Couture, and you'll be able to see all of the products there. And if you want a sneak peek onto our Mountain Chalkers team, you're more than welcome to. Just send me a message and I will include you in the group for 24 hours and you can check out what we're working on. So thanks for watching, everybody, and seriously, if you guys get a hold of these thrift store frames, you know, chalk everything that you can get a hold of. Alright guys, I'll catch you later. Thanks.